Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for attending this afternoon session. This is a session to officially launch our guidance that we've worked on developing very hard over the last 18 months on supporting mainstream schools in developing an internal resource provision. So I'll do some quick introductions to start us off. My name's Catherine Bailey, and I am the School Improvement SEND Advisor. I work in the Education Excellence team, and I'm going to hand over to Jess to introduce herself.
Good afternoon. I'm Jess Collings, SEND and Inclusion Support Officer.
Anna?
And good afternoon, everyone. Anna Loveland, SEND and Inclusion Support Officer, also part of the SEND Early Identification Support Service. Lovely to be here.
Lovely. So today, obviously, it's been advertised as a workshop, but we wanted to provide an online session for those of you who might find it a bit more challenging to attend face-to-face. So today's session isn't going to be as workshop-y as it would be in a face-to-face session, but what we're hoping to achieve is to really just help you become familiar and understand the inclusion and practice, a guidance for mainstream schools establishing internal resource provision for pupils of SEND. It's a mouthful of a title, but that is the document. We're going to help you to gain an awareness of the statutory and local authority expectations around developing an internal resource provision, and then to know how LA services can support you using this guidance. So we know many of you might already have one established, so it might be that you use the guidance to help review the impact of one that's already established, or if you're right at the beginning of your journey and you're thinking about setting one up, then this is a great time for you to have got guidance with you and a package of training and support ready to go. So that works out very well. Okay, so just a bit of background information about the guidance to start us off. So we as local authority services are aware and became aware over time of the rising number of our mainstream schools that are establishing internal resource provisions. And that is, as you all know, to meet the growing needs of pupils in your settings. We also know that there's the direction of travel for SEND from our Labour government. Although the white paper has been delayed, we do know that there is likely to be something around expanding the use of mainstream provision, resource provisions and units in mainstream settings. So we're looking more towards how do we support mainstream settings to support these children, and kind of less away from the special school model as being the only solution. So that's the direction of travel. So we have to keep up with it. We have it's a bit outdated now, this information, but as of November 2024, when we were first collecting a lot of information, we knew then that around 54 schools across Wolverhampton were either considering, in the process of establishing, or had already established an internal resource provision. And of course, you were all seeking guidance and support. We were kind of all figuring it out as we went along, right? So we thought it made sense for us to come up with some guidance so that we can ensure that consistent messages are being shared to you all and that we're being as supportive as possible. I'm not going to spend a long time on this slide, but this just gives you a bit of a roadmap. It kind of goes down, up and down about the journey we've been on. So the key things you need to know is that this has been an ongoing thing for about 18 months. So March 2024, we started having those initial conversations about, potentially producing some guidance. I attended a symposium by The Difference on internal alternative provision, and that kind of helped us to start frame our thinking. And then Jess, Anna, and I started to put together some draft guidance. It then got shared more widely, so we started to involve the service managers, and then we put together a working group. And that really has resulted in what I would say is genuinely co-produced documentation and guidance. And that's where we are today. It's been approved by our leadership teams, and we have officially launched it now to support settings. Okay, and this is what the document looks like. So if those of you who've been able to download it from the WISE website, this is the front cover. It is intended to be a guide for mainstream schools that have or are considering establishing internal resource provision. In the document, we've used the term IRP when referring to internal resource provision, and the name internal resource provision has come from the literature around this. So lots of people call it different things, but this was the most consistent term we found in the literature, so this is what we are calling it. It comprises of 6 chapters, including guidance around language and terminology used within the document and useful definition of terms, which are the first 2 chapters. So we're not going to go over those because they're really, we say chapters, but they're really kind of paragraphs that just give you sort of the context of what this document is about and how to use it. So in the introduction, the key points there are that IRPs should be developed as supportive, proactive, and planned approach to inclusion. Really clear that there is no expectation from the local authority that a mainstream school establishes an IRP. It's totally up to you if you decide to do that with your resources. And IRP should be designed to support pupils whose needs cannot be met within the mainstream classroom at a particular time. So we do quite often throughout the document talk about it being viewed as a time-bound intervention. We know that the reality is that there'll be differences for different pupils. Some children might need to spend more time there than others, but we call it a time-bound intervention with the hope that there will be that robust kind of assess, plan, do, review when we're thinking about this provision. And we'll go into more detail about that as we go on. And the guidance is for internal provisions, so that means it's not funded by the local authority. You all know this. It's just some schools are finding it as a more efficient way to kind of pool resources. If you've got a number of children who potentially are receiving some top-up funding for an EHCP, pooling them together rather than giving them lots of one-to-ones can actually be a more efficient use of resources, but it is coming from your own school's budget. So just to be really clear on that. And then we have the guidance about the guidance and how to use it. So again, the key points for this section is we recommend schools seek support from specialists when utilizing the guidance. So rather than doing it alone in your office or, you know, in a corridor by yourself or in your cupboard, I don't know. It's good to try to do this with others. So it might be your outreach teacher, it might be your specialist teacher, it might be school improvement advisor. It can be any professional that you work with in the local authority. They've all been trained on how to use this guidance document. So we do recommend that you get that sort of external outside perspective to help you while you're using this guidance. And the document is underpinned by statutory guidance as well as non-statutory guidance, and it focuses on the need to use a graduated approach. So those are the key points for those first few parts of the guidance. And now I'm going to hand over to Jess.
Thank you. So the next section in the guidance is a reflective self-evaluation tool. This part of the guidance is actually looking at your whole universal offer across the entire school. So it's not just about your internal resource provision. So what we've done is we put together some statements for you to kind of work with your senior leadership team, work with your specialists, work with your staff and parent carers to review the current universal offer within your entire setting and looking at the kind of quality of teaching and education that's taking place. So as we said, we encourage you to kind of do this alongside your specialists, because obviously they can offer that objective perspective. And when we did this, the idea would have been, in an ideal world, we would have created this guidance before settings felt the need to have to establish these internal resource provisions. So it's that opportunity to kind of reflect on what developments perhaps need to take place in order to kind of review the current SEND provision. We know, as we've said, lots of you have already established these provisions, and some of you have had them in place for probably a couple of years now as well. But you can still do this reflective evaluation, because it's an opportunity to kind of look at perhaps other areas of your SEND provision that you could prioritise alongside developing your IRP. So it's just really kind of focusing on what that graduated approach looks like, how robust it is, and ensuring that you've got that consistent high quality teaching across the entire school. Because as Catherine's already said, you know, we really we want to promote this idea that these internal resource provisions are that time-bound intervention, with a view that it's for those children that are struggling at this point in time to access the main school, and therefore we want to ensure that it's allowing the rest of your school to become as inclusive as possible. Okay. So the rest of the document is divided up into our 11 core components. So we've listed them there, and what we're going to do now is we're going to go through each of these sections and just share them with you, give you a little opportunity. We'll give you some key information from them, and then we'll give you a little bit of time to kind of read through it yourselves and ask any questions for each of the sections. So I had to put some arrows on the top here, you can see, just to remind me to bring this to your attention. So each of these sections now for the core components is set out with, on the left-hand side, you've got the statutory requirements, the LA guidance that underpins the section. And then on the right-hand side, you've got those inquiry questions, which we found would be the most useful way to kind of support you when you're kind of planning and developing your provision. So in this section, we're looking at the purpose, and you know, it's really important that as a school, you've got that kind of clear purpose for why you've established your IRP, and making sure that everybody understands that, not just staff, but parent carers and everybody who's involved within it. This is going to prevent the IRP moving away from that original rationale and the intended purpose, and obviously it needs to align with what the school's ethos and values are. So as I said, we're going to give you a little bit of time now. Hopefully you've got the document up there yourselves, or you can obviously read it on the slide. Just have a quick read through there, and if you've got any questions that you want to ask, then you can either pop them in the chat or be brave and put your hand up and share it on camera. So this is quite a short section, so we'll just give you a minute or so. Anybody got any questions about that section? It should be, I imagine that you've all established your purpose now, if you've got an IRP. Okay, should we move on to the next slide? Okay, so 6.2 is collaboration. So it's really important that you establish those effective mechanisms for communication across the IRP and the school, and we just wanted to highlight the importance there of making sure your governing body is obviously included in this. You know, we like to think of the governing body as your critical friend, and just making sure they're involved in that kind of decision making. And utilising that restorative approach to ensure that you're kind of meeting everybody's needs, particularly those parent carers who have got children accessing your provision. In terms of that, you know, ensuring you've got a robust graduated approach. As with everything, you want to have the child at the centre of that, and it's kind of accepting that the parent carer is going to be the expert when it comes to ensuring that they're you know it's genuine collaboration with parent carers when looking at your provision and reviewing the offer within your IRP. And probably don't need to remind you, but just in case it is in there, that you know every teacher is a teacher of SEND, and having an internal resource provision is a really great opportunity to develop inclusion across the entire school, so that you know the whole school can better meet the needs of those children accessing the provision and those with SEND. So a little bit of time again. We don't like awkward silences, but we know you need to have time to process the information, so a little bit of time just to look through, and again, if you've got any questions about any of the information, do just ask.
time list. So
Any questions? If not, we'll move on, I think.
Are we pacing this okay? Do any of you need more time? Are you happy for us to move forward? Okay, no responses. Thumbs up. Lovely. Let's carry on then.
Okay, so 6.3, we're looking at referral criteria now. And obviously this will go back to the first section around the purpose. So the referral criteria is obviously going to depend on what the purpose of your IRP was and why it was established. So for example, if you've established it to meet a particular area of need for a group of children or young people. Your referral criteria is you're going to need a really clear and robust graduated approach, and we definitely say it needs to be supported by those educational specialists, and making sure that that's evident before considering a child for accessing your internal resource provision. You need to ensure that's been agreed by everybody, including the parent and carers, that the pupil's going to benefit more from accessing periods of time in your IRP over accessing their mainstream classroom full time. And just to remind you that obviously people shouldn't be accessing an IRP purely because English is an additional language. It might be that they have English as additional language and they've got then some SEND in addition to that. But if it's purely because of English as an additional language, then they should be in the mainstream classroom, being surrounded by that kind of language rich environment and vocabulary to kind of support them with that. A little bit of time for you to read it again. I'm going to assume you're all reading it intently and you're not off somewhere making a cup of tea. Okay, I'm assuming there's no questions about that section. If not, we'll move on, and I think Anna is doing the next.
to me, into 6.4. So we're moving on to curriculum and provision. So it's important to ensure that the curriculum should remain sort of broad and balanced, giving pupils access to that wide range of subjects, but at the same time keeping those expectations high, challenging pupils while providing that sort of right support. Learning in the IRP should link closely to what's being taught in the mainstream classroom. That synergy helps pupils transition smoothly and feel connected to their peers and they're in class. At the face-to-face workshop, we actually discussed how whole school themes might sort of support this. For example, if autumn's maybe a whole school theme, then the curriculum offering the IRP could be similar in that respect. The pedagogy will differ from the mainstream classroom. Teaching might look a little bit different, maybe more structured, more individualised, maybe more scaffolded, but those approaches meet the needs of the children without lowering those standards that we would expect. We need to be offering explicit teaching skills to enable children to access the mainstream classroom, such as those sort of social communication, those independence, maybe those sort of self-regulation skills. to prepare for them to access that mainstream classroom and prepare for adulthood as well. And I think, I think we've mentioned this already as well. We need to view that access to the IRP as a time-bound intervention. It's not a permanent placement. It's not a destination. If we monitor progress and plan for reintegration from the start, it won't be seen as that destination. So I'll just give you a couple of moments to read, or think if you have any questions. And we'll have time for a Q&A session at the end as well. So if you want to wait till then, that's fine too.
I think as well, an important caveat to mention is that, every school's circumstances are going to be different, and the children that are in your IRP will look different. We've had to develop this guidance from a quite general standpoint. So, if we're talking secondary schools, setting up an internal AP, primary schools, setting up an internal resource provision, differing needs might be met in those provisions. So don't let it alarm you if you're having to do something slightly different. I think this is just what we would say is good practice, and kind of trying to maintain high expectations, that graduated approach as much as possible with your curriculum offer as well.
Any questions for this section, 6.4? You should move on. Okay, on to assessment. So it's really essential that schools have that clear and consistent assessment process in place, and it should be integrated within the school's current and existing systems, where you're sort of tracking academic progress or social development or emotional well-being. We're not expecting you to do this alone. Obviously, Catherine mentioned earlier on the support out there for the school improvement advisors, from your specialist learning support teachers, or from myself and Jess. Please do reach out if you want to seek any guidance on those assessment tools that are available. When deciding whether a pupil should access the IRP, it's important to be clear on what assessments you're using. As Catherine says, they may have different purposes, so you wouldn't expect them all to be the same. And that ensures there's sort of transparency and consistency across your school setting. We've already sort of mentioned the IRP is not a destination, so we mustn't limit pupils' potential by using the IRP without, that clear plan for progression and reintegration back into the mainstream classroom. And, as Jess mentioned earlier, all teachers are teachers of SEND, and it's really important to remember that the class teachers do continue to remain responsible for the pupils who access the IRP. If they're on the register in their class, the class teacher maintains that responsibility, and the teachers do need to continue to play that central role in the sort of planning, and we'll come on to that as well. But it's really important to make sure that the pupils do remain fully included in the life of their classroom, even if they are accessing the IRP. So I'll give you a couple of moments to read that. Feel the white noise is getting louder. Any questions for that one? It's the sound of my laptop. As I said, we'll have an opportunity for Q&A at the end as well. Should we move on then to 6.6? I say so. On to staffing. So pupils accessing the IRP, they must still receive high quality teaching from a qualified teacher for part of their day, and that could be achieved through maybe a daily rota from the class teacher who've got children in the IRP, because obviously it's important that children, they sort of benefit from the expertise and curriculum delivery that a qualified teacher offers. We have worked with the school who they worked with a timetable so that each member of staff who had a child who was accessing the IRP. They timetabled them, so they spent part of the day in the IRP, and that was on a rota. So the 5 children who were accessing
It was actually
the IRP,
weekly. I think it was weekly. So they were actually spending, half an hour per week in the IRP because they had 5 different class teachers with children in the
so
IRP.
each teacher had
Yeah,
that opportunity to learn from the provision that was in the IRP as well. So different schools are doing it in different ways. It's important to remember that class teachers retain oversight of progress and outcomes for pupils accessing the IRP. They remain accountable for their sort of learning journey, and need to ensure that that's sort of carrying on. We have known that teachers who maybe the child is accessing more time in the IRP, they maintain those relationships with parents by chairing the SEND support meetings, but also asking the IRP staff to join them for those as well. It's really helpful if there's opportunities for joint planning between the class teachers and IRP staff to support that curriculum delivery. Those sort of clear and consistent communication mechanisms, thinking about sort of shared planning documents, shared PPA time, really offers you that cohesive approach with, sort of that opportunities between all the staff to work together. And finally, staff in the IRP should focus on building that really strong, trusting relationships with pupils. Those relationships, they're the foundation for that emotional safety and engagement and progress. So when the children are feeling understood, they will thrive, both academically and socially as well. There's quite a lot on that slide, but we'll just give you a couple of moments to read those. Any questions on staffing? Any thoughts people would like to share?
it might be that people need processing time today and that they might want to join our community practice that we're talking about later to kind of talk through some of these the nuances between and differences between different settings and how they're approaching this. So don't feel like you have to ask questions if you don't have any, but like Anna said, we'll have a Q&A at the end as well. Happy to move forward
Yeah,
then?
move on to timetables.
There we go.
Thank you. So yeah, this section I'm going to focus on the importance of sort of timetabling. It needs to be sort of clear consideration to both the IRP timetable and the individual timetable of the pupils accessing it. They need to be thoughtfully planned so the pupils receive that, right support at the right time without missing out on those key learning opportunities in the classroom. If a child's got a special interest and that's, occurring in the mainstream classroom, it's really important to be flexible and allow them to access that. They should be flexible, fluid and personal. Each pupil's needs are different, so their timetables should reflect that. And really importantly, it's, they need to be reviewed regularly to ensure they remain relevant and effective as the pupil's needs change. As we've said, we've not seen this as a destination. If we're using that assess plan do review cycle well, then those timetables will need to be flexible for that reason. For safeguarding purposes, all staff need to know where pupils are at any given time. We're thinking about the transitions between mainstream classrooms and the IRP. It's non-negotiable that if the pupils in the IRP, in the class or elsewhere, perhaps in the Forest School area, we need to know where they are to know that they're safe. By having clearly defined timetables and viewing that IRP as a time-bound intervention, we can sort of, stop it being used as that, ad hoc basis. From there, having the structure ensures the IRP is purposeful and strategic, rather than maybe turning into that space where perhaps, a member of staff who's maybe struggling with the pupil and is unsure how to deal with them, will use it as that space to send the child to. And finally, but crucial, schools must notify the local authority if pupils aren't accessing full-time education and they're on an SPLP. It's a statutory requirement and ensures that all pupils are accounted for and that they're receiving that entitlement to full-time education. A couple of moments to read that one. Any questions on the timetables or any thoughts people would like to share? I'm feeling this as a theme, I should say. I think people need time to process. There's a lot of information sharing going on here. Move on to you, Catherine.
Great, thank you. So the next component is around supporting transitions between the IRP and the classroom. So the key points for this section are, again, and you'll notice the theme here, this language is repeated throughout the document. If we're viewing the IRP as a time-bound intervention and part of the school's graduated approach, then inevitably there will be transition points. So it might be linking to the timetables that Anna talked about before. It might be that there's some daily transitions that happen. So maybe children spend the morning in the IRP and then noon in their main classroom, or maybe they go back to their main classroom for one lesson, or they go to the hall, for, the dinner hall for lunch. So those are transition points. So thinking clearly about how those transitions are being supported. There will also be the transition into the IRP when they first join, and then if successful and they are ready to return to their main classroom, there'll be that transition back into the main classroom. So thinking clearly about whether or not that's staggered, it's done over time, which involved, what are those clear systems in place to support transitions? Do all staff in the school have knowledge and understanding of children's strengths and their individual needs, from your dinner staff to your support staff to your admin staff? If children are transitioning around the school, do they know about that child and how best to support that child, so that those transitions are as smooth as possible? Appropriate adaptations and reasonable adjustments will need to be made to support pupils with transitions, as per you would do anyway with your graduated approach and as per the SEND Code of Practice. And again, the SEND Code of Practice states the need to agree interventions with parents and pupils and have that clear systems in place to review provisions. So you will be doing this as well when you're first considering whether or not a child might need to spend some time in the IRP. You will likely be having conversations with parents, making sure they're informed, they know that it's an intervention, and that there will be regular review points to kind of check on how children are progressing and how they're doing. So those are the key points. Give you another couple moments then to read, and if you have any questions, do let us know. Any questions? I'll take the silence to mean no. Or maybe you're saving it till the end. It's absolutely fine too. So then the next core component, 6.9, is on the physical environment. So you will need to be thinking about the physical environment, the space where you'll be holding your IRP. You need to really carefully consider that. So thinking about, for example, the location it is in the school. Is it sort of central in the school? Is it far removed from the school? How does that ensure that there's that sense of belonging with the wider school? You will inevitably be restricted to some degree depending on the way your school is built and the way it's laid out. But if you have options between maybe one space or another space, really thinking about how do we maintain that sense of belonging with the wider school? How do we make sure that, it's a lovely place for children, protecting their kind of integrity and equity? Things like, is it fit for purpose? Do they have access to toilets? Do they have access to windows? Outdoor space if that's possible. So thinking about, is it going to offer them opportunities that, their mainstream peers would be, their classmates that are in the main classroom full time would also have access to. So yeah, it's all there. Location, access to outdoor space, accessible toilets, etc. And there's some inquiry questions there on the side, just like in all the other components, to have you really have a think about that. This is not as long of a section, so I'll just give you maybe slightly less than a minute to read. Okay. If there are no questions, I will move on. So then 6.10 is about viability and sustainability. And we felt it was really important to include this here because I think, and some of you might be experiencing this now, especially if you're 1 or 2 years down the line of having this. How do you make sure that it is viable and sustainable, and that provision can continue to be used by the new intake of children that come in that might need to access it in the future? So ultimately, our goal is that pupils would successfully transition back to their classroom full time. We know some of them might move on to other destinations, but if we're thinking from the beginning, okay, what are the skills, knowledge that they need to develop to start spending increasingly more time back in their main classroom, that's going to ensure that there's that viability and sustainability with the provision. So having clear criteria for accessing the provision and those clear progress measures. So these are the things that we would expect them to be able to do, say, achieve, to be able to access some more time in the main classroom. That will all support that viability and sustainability. And again, you're going to have to prioritize, right? So only the pupils who will most benefit from the IRP will access it at any given time. There's some key questions there on the right-hand side around like, what do you do when it's full? So it's like thinking that through. What do you do as children age? So maybe they're Key Stage 1 pupils. They might be getting ready to move into Key Stage 2. Have you really considered kind of what that looks like, and how you're going to make sure that that is sustainable longer term? And just a couple of moments to read that. Any questions? Okay, and then the last core component is on about the impact beyond the internal resource provision. So we said right at the start that this is a really great opportunity to grow your inclusive provision and inclusive practices across the school. So if it is set up with that intention right from the beginning, making sure the whole school is more inclusive, we can see this as an inclusive step rather than an exclusionary step. So I think what we're seeing is we're actually looking at how leaders and teachers and staff can take those specific strategies and practices that are being utilized in the IRP and apply them to universal inclusive practices across the school. It will depend, obviously, on staffing, training, etc., but it might be that you have some opportunities for teachers to share practice between the IRP and the main classroom. Maybe there can be some CPD that can happen for the whole school to provide support. There's lots of opportunities, and you'll be thinking right from the beginning, okay, which ones are we able to roll out a bit more universally, and which ones are really more better served as the really targeted kind of specialist level interventions. So I think it's about seeing where there is an opportunity to roll that out more widely, and having, again, what we talked about with the staffing, if classroom teachers have opportunities to work with pupils in the IRP, they are going to develop their confidence and knowledge in working with children with increasingly complex needs. So it can really be seen as kind of a whole school approach and a real opportunity to grow inclusive practice across the school. And ultimately, that will have a positive impact on long-term pupil outcomes. So that is the goal. And yeah, I'm sure as we continue to support you all with this over time, we'd love to find out more about how this is working in your settings, how this is improving inclusion and inclusive practices in your school. Really interested in sharing best practice and challenges and working through that together. So just the 30 seconds-ish to read this. And then I don't know if Claire is on the call. She is. Okay, I'll hand over to Claire in a moment. Okay, any questions about that core component? No? Lovely. I am now going to hand over to Claire Swift, one of our specialist teachers. You here, Claire?
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you.
You're
Hi,
welcome.
everyone. Good afternoon. Hope you're all okay. I've just been given a bit of time now just to talk through the community of practice, and I will summarise what it's all about. But I'm really, really excited to be asked to be the facilitator. So my name is Claire Swift. I'm a specialist teacher for Wolverhampton. And alongside the local authority guidance, we have decided that a community of practice would be more suitable and appropriate for the type of support we want to offer alongside the guidance. Purely because of research, because it states that working collaboratively, sharing good practice is more effective than traditional CPD on occasions, and I think this particular occasion that would be very true. So a community of practice is a professional learning community where members share learning and experiences and engage in critical reflection. So every session that we have, and we're doing them half-termly, the first one being the 11th of November, which is next Tuesday, we will be able to come together as a community and everybody can share or raise a concern within their internal resource provision. And as a collaborative group, we will share lots of different ideas and experiences that will help a particular school out with their situation. It's really exciting because there will be representatives from the local authority and also health, which will be an opportunity for everybody to ask questions to those particular representatives. But it's really important to note that I, as the facilitator, or representatives from the local authority or health, are not representing us being expertise or specialists in this community of practice. So this is us coming together and sharing lots of practice and experience, like I said, and you know, we're going to learn a lot from you as well, which hopefully we can feed back into the guidance and support that we offer schools moving forward. There's going to be a lot of discussion, lots of reflection, lots of collaboration, and we want you to feel psychologically safe in these sessions as well, because I think a lot of the experiences that are going to be shared will probably make you feel quite vulnerable, and we want you to be very honest and open. So my job as a facilitator is to make sure that we have lots of boundaries which are agreed by the whole group, and that will be done on the first session. So you know, confidentiality and safety is really, really important. We will be using the Gibbs reflective model, which I will share on Tuesday as well, and looking at the purpose of your IRPs, which will be really, really important. The next slide just goes through really the community of practice. So as I said, it's on Tuesday, the 11th of November, 1:30 till 4. It's at Cherry Street Send and Sensory Hub, and the link to book on that is there as well. And I've just looked through who's on the call, and there are a couple of you that are already booked on, which is really exciting. But if anybody else would like to join us, we would love to have you there. So yeah, go ahead and book, and if you want the link sent directly, then contact one of us, because I'm sure we can do that as well. But yeah, I think that's everything, unless I've missed anything out. But yeah, really excited. Yeah, so if you've booked on, I'll see you there Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, I think we're all very excited, and I think what you said is really important. We are viewing you all as the experts in this, because you're the ones on the ground doing it day in and day out. So I think a community practice model is going to be really amazing opportunity for us to share practice together, and to really develop our implementation of this guidance and our implementation of these internal resource provisions across the city. So really looking forward to it. I'll be there. Can't wait. Okay, and I'm handing over now to Anna to talk about action research.
So also as part of this as well, so the local authority, led by our EP service, we tend to carry out some action research around the guidance document. So the purpose of the action research will be to sort of evaluate the impact of the guidance, you know, through facilitating and exploration of that effectiveness, how we've adopted it, you know, what it's been like for you guys to implement it, and, you know, whether or not we can continue that moving forward. In doing that, the research will influence future iterations of the guidance. You know, we shared with you at the very beginning the journey that we went on. You know, it was co-produced, but we appreciate the maybe ways that the guidance can be improved. And as Catherine and Claire have just shared, you know, your knowledge and expertise will be, you know, fundamental in that you're on the ground, you're doing it. So, you know, we really would appreciate your thoughts and views on that one as well. So, you know, the action research project will be a way that you'll be able to share your experiences and contribute to meaningful improvements to the guidance. So hopefully you'll be joining Claire, Catherine, myself and other colleagues in the community of practice sessions, and we'll probably use those community of practice sessions to share these, you know, the timeline of the action research as well, and we'll share that with you through the Teams channel and other methods as well. But it's really exciting that, you know, it's not just we're handing it to you, you know, we're very aware that, you know, it's something that, you know, we will be seeking your support and guidance with moving forward as well.
Thanks, Anna. Yeah, and I think what we want to make clear here is, like, this guidance document is officially launched. It's on the WISE website. So you have, as schools, you have options now. So we really do hope you join us with the community of practice, but you don't have to. It's not a requirement. But we do really hope you do. The action research will come kind of in the form of some surveys and some work with the EP service, and that will go out to all settings that have an IRP and are using this guidance. So it could be that you decide to, you know, get in contact with your school improvement advisor, for example, or with specialist teacher, and you want to just have them come and visit the school, and you go through the guidance together, and actually you feel like that is as much as you need to do at this point in time, and then you complete the survey as part of the action research, and then that's your involvement. Or it might be that you really are fully, you know, joining in on all aspects of this. So you're joining the community practice, you're getting specialists involved to help support with the review and development of your IRP. You're taking part in the action research. Totally up to you. And we really do hope that you find that there's a supportive kind of offer available for you to really implement this guidance effectively. Have I said everything, Jess, Anna, and Claire? Anything else you think we need to add? Yeah, okay, lovely. So does anyone have any questions? I'm just very aware that nobody has asked any questions in this session.
Is anybody there?
Yeah. If you need some processing time, that's absolutely fine. Just at the community practice, if you can, that's a great time for questions as well. So no pressure. Or you can email us. Just want to make sure that you feel like you've had a chance to discuss and respond.
I think there's so much information, people clearly need a little bit more processing time.
That's absolutely fine. If you do think of anything, pop it in the chat or send us an email, like I said, or, you know, ask us questions in the upcoming support offer we have available. So we would like to, before we say goodbye, we would really appreciate you taking the time. And I don't know if one of you can pop that link in the chat. I don't know if I can while I'm sharing my screen.
I'll do that.
Thank you. Please fill in this quick survey. It just helps us get a bit more information about where you're at on your journey, how you're feeling about the guidance, what potential core components you might want some support with, and that will help feed into the community practice and the support offer that we provide you. Shouldn't take more than a minute or two. And this will give us a couple more moments to, if anyone has any questions, to feel brave to say something. We've got some thank yous. Okay, lovely. Yeah, Trish says we're just digesting the information. Yeah, that's fine. Don't worry at all. Yep, absolutely fine for you to email us questions. No problem. All right, just make sure that you're all completing the form, but once you've done that, you are very welcome to leave, and we've given you half an hour of your time back. So that's great news for everyone, I think. And thank you so much for attending.